thing is about relationships. I was luckily single at the time when I went to camp.
For me, personally speaking, I saw there's better fish in the sea.
You mentioned it in your book, and I wondered if you could explain what camp goggles are.
As much as summer camp is an absolute blast, the time of your life, it's also one of the hardest jobs you'll ever have. The schoolboy error number one is to book anything for travels prior to actually arriving at camp. I wouldn't normally be having a poo on a toilet where I can see through a crack in the door, and I just tilt my head slightly and I can see an Israeli fully naked in the shower.
Hi guys, I hope you're well. So in today's video we are delving deeper into what camp and summer camp is really like. We're going to give you the raw truth and absolutely holding nothing back. So to do that, I have a very special guest. He is the author of the book There Is No Place Like Summer Camp, which we're going to talk about later, and that is Andrew Waterhouse. He also has a podcast with the same name where he talks all about summer camp and what it's all about. My favourite thing about Andrew's book is that he holds nothing back. He goes into detail about camp. As Andrew says, he spills the beans, and that's what I want to do, because I feel like, yes, I've spoke about what camp is like on my channel, but there's some things that I never went into, so we're going to get into that in this video. Stay tuned to the end, because that's where we'll talk about more of the unfiltered topics, but we're also going to talk about all the things that you will need to know before you go to camp. So, hello Andrew, how are you?
Hi Maisie, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me on. I'm so excited for this chat. Been looking forward to it for a long time.
I know, it has been a long time coming, to be fair. First things first, should we just talk about the basic questions? So when did you go to camp and what camp did you go to?
I went to camp in 2014, which seems like an eternity ago. It's called Camp Honeystone in the book, and I think I'll probably keep it like that in this interview. Camp Honeystone, I was there for 2 summers, 2014 being my first, 2015 being the second.
Nice. And what would you say from your experience of camp made you want to write the book and start a podcast?
I've always been writing a diary, to be honest. It was something that I've always just been in a habit of doing. I've always found that summer camp's been this like mysterious, really good experience, but no one could really say what happened at camp. There wasn't really any sort of books back in 2014.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why so many people are interested in these videos, because they're like, I hear about Camp America, but they don't know what it is. And having read your book, I think even people that haven't been to camp would be interested in it, because it's just like, it's like why we're so interested in films like Parent Trap and Camp Rock and stuff like that, because it's another world. And it genuinely, I found that it was another world when I went to camp. But it's funny though, because I also did had a diary when I went to camp as well. So I wrote every day what I did.
Oh, that's quality. Yeah, you'd have to publish yours at some point.
Oh gosh, I don't think I've got those skills. But another thing that people are really interested in on my channel is the recruitment process. So I just wanted to ask you briefly how you found that and how you got recruited.
I came about doing summer camp because I heard adults around me that had done it. They're saying that's the best time of your life. So it had always been in the back of my mind, oh, maybe one day I'll do it. It wasn't until I think it was my 3rd year of university. University was coming to an end, didn't have any jobs on the line. Suddenly the puzzle pieces clicked in my head where I was like, oh, I actually have a free summer here. So I applied to camp pretty late. I think it was probably March sort of time that I started to apply. That cut it really fine for things like getting the visa in time. I didn't go to a recruitment fair. I didn't go through anything like that. I did it all online. I did the normal application process where you fill in your details. And I always like to call it like an Argos catalogue, if they still make those anymore.
Yeah.
Where you sort of create a profile and then all of the camps take a look through this Argos catalogue of staff. First camp that picked me out was Camp Honeystone, and I was selected as a outdoor living specialist.
It's interesting, because I was sort of the opposite, and I applied really early on. So I went to the recruitment fairs and all that So it's good to know for people though that even if you do apply late, like you can still get on. Then in your book, and what I love about it is how you've like broke it down into sections. So you have like staff week, then first session, second session, and then travels after. And like that was sort of very similar structure to my summer camp experience, and I imagine it's the same at most summer camps. Could you sort of give a brief overview of what the structure was like at your camp and how long those sessions were for?
A lot of the camps you go to, it's not just you hit the ground running with the kids. You have to get acclimatized to the camp. You have to get acclimatized to the food, where things are, setting up your specialty. And there's that 2-week window where you're sort of settling in, and then the kids arrive and it's chaos from there. So in our camp, it was 2 separate months of kids. So those kids would be divided into age groups called units at our camp. And those units would sort of have a similar sort of schedule to like a school would, in a way, where they would have like certain types of lessons that would run through the day. And then you get those, I think it's 30 days of visa time where you can travel across the United States. So I did a couple of weeks in my first summer.
And you mentioned there that you had a bit of time off. Did you have much time off throughout camp? Because my experience was we hardly had any time off. We'd have like a few hours each day. You'd have like a break in your day. But then other than that, I think we only had like 5 or 6 days off throughout the whole of the actual summer camp.
As much as summer camp is an absolute blast, the time of your life, it's also one of the hardest jobs you'll ever have. It's not an 8-hour shift. There's no such thing as a weekend at camp. And I think we worked it out when I was at camp that it was something like throughout a week, you'd either have 1 full day off or 1 evening off. And that was it.
Your role was outdoor specialist, was it? So I think at my camp that was like, we called it like outdoor outdoor activities or something. So like what would be a typical day for you in that role?
Official title is Outdoor Living Specialist. That practically means taking the kids out on camp outs away from summer camp. So it was quite a unique role in that I wasn't, running a class. I wasn't teaching kids anything. Taking them on camp outs in tents, away from their cabins, taking them on canoe trips, hikes, doing the campfires. I was the s'mores guy.
The best.
Yeah, it was different to anyone else at camp, and a lot of people were jealous of my role.
A lot of things that I picked up on your book were all the little things that I could relate to, like the campfires, camp songs, yellow buses, school buses to Walmart, the overly sweet cereal, like all of that. It just brought back so many memories. But the one thing that was different to my camp was the fact that yours was Jewish. And I just wondered if you could sort of give a brief overview of what it was like to work at a Jewish camp.
Yeah, that's a good question, because imagine a lot of the viewers here will think I'm maybe Jewish myself and going in there knowing, what Shabbat is and loads of things, but I had no exposure to Judaism or any Jewish friends, anything prior to that at camp. But when I first applied to summer camp, I really wanted that culture shock experience of getting to know how a different culture sort of runs and going really into the deep end. It was definitely a culture shock in those first couple of days when they're singing before and after every meal, and you're just like looking around and you sort of like catch an eye of a fellow Brit who's just like completely out of their depth. Something that I'll always cherish because I still remember the songs and all of the Jewish names. It wasn't something that would put me off from applying.
Well, to be fair, even though mine wasn't Jewish, like camp in itself, until you're there, I don't think that you realise like how different it is to the real world. It's good to know like if people are they've got an option of a Jewish camp, that it's not sort of daunting. And
no, I think the only thing that made it daunting for me was if I would have got a special needs camp, because that takes another level of care and attention and experience, which I didn't have.
Obviously, something else that's different is the fact that you returned to camp. So I've only been to camp once. Were you happy that you returned, and how would you say it was the same when you returned to camp?
I returned to camp because of how deep the friendships go at camp. I always think of summer camp sort of like Big Brother house, because you're in this bubble, you can't escape. you're stuck there without any phone signal, you're making friends, you're making all these memories, you're going traveling, you're getting to know kids and campers. And that's what drew me back for that second summer, because we had a group of people that didn't know each other before camp, now sort of best friends, all promising each other that we were going to return for one more summer. And lo and behold, we did. And it was a different experience returning for a second summer. I'm currently midway through writing that second book, but you expect a lot of the same people that were there in the first summer to actually be there in the second. And it's only when you go back for a second summer that you really see the churn of staff that summer camps go through. So the people that I would become very close with in my first book, not being there for the second completely changes your experience. The second summer, personally speaking, didn't live up to the first. Second summer was always a comparison, and that's probably something that a lot of people would risk. I know people that have gone for, 3, 4. There's some people that are still going to camp now, 8 years later. So it's something that you should bear in mind if you're going back for that second summer. Just think, are you going to ruin the feeling of camp by going for that second time? Because you're always going to be comparing to your first.
Yeah, I think that was a reason why I didn't go back as well, because I knew that it was never going to be the same. At the same time, it'll still be a good summer, it just won't be the same, I imagine. But you also touched on there making friends and sort of the independence of camp and Camp America. And a lot of people that watch these videos always comment saying is it easy to make friends? I'm scared of obviously going to America and on my own. Well, first question is, what was your experience of going away and on your own? Did you find it scary? I know you did because I've read your book, but
I'd never gone abroad by myself. I'd never gone to the cinema by myself, never done anything like that. And it was a leap of faith that I'm so grateful that I did, because not a lot of people, even, I'm in my 30s now, I talk to people and they've never traveled by themselves, and it's a leap of faith in getting independent, thinking that you can make friends. I had no confidence in myself that I'd make friends, and there's a point in the book on the very first day that I arrive at camp that I was jet lagged, obviously landed in a camp. Everyone's a stranger, didn't know anyone, beside a couple of people that I found on Facebook, but that was about it. And I could have easily gone to bed. I was like, you know what? It's the first day. I can't just wake up in this dormitory of strangers. It'd be a bit weird. So let's go out there and see who's around and just greet myself. And that really set the bar for me of, once that initial ice was chipped away, it was a breeze since then. No one knows who you are at camp. You can be your authentic self, and you're going to make tons of friends. And some of the best friends I still have to this day, even though it was from summer camp in 2014, and we might only see each other maybe once a year. It's more about the depth of friendship, and that's what you get at camp.
Even though that initial sort of step of just saying hello to somebody might be quite scary, once you've done it, it's a breeze after that. Another thing that people worry about is the travel making travel plans, because as we touched on before, when I went to Camp America, I was thinking about already, where am I going to go traveling? What am I going to do? And people say, oh, when do you start making your travel plans and stuff like that? And I say to them, you need to just go with the flow. It's really important to just build your friendships, and then naturally those conversations will occur. Would you agree with that? And what was your experience?
Absolutely. The schoolboy error number 1 is to book anything for travels prior to actually arriving at camp, because there's people that have made that mistake at my camp where they ended up just traveling by themselves, and they were sort of stuck because they booked a flight, they booked a hotel, they were going to all these different places. But the group of people that they would have otherwise traveled with, they want to go and do their own thing. They want to go visit their friend's house. There's all sorts of different things that, people could go and travel towards. And at the end of the day, you're not going to summer camp to go and travel by yourself afterwards. You want to go and have more memories with some of the best friends that you ever make. 100% keep it as open as possible. The worst that's going to happen is you make no friends and you go and travel the travel plans that you wanted to do anyway. There's no rush to get them pre-booked or anything like that. I don't know anyone that's walked out of camp without a friend.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And so finally we'll get on to the unfiltered topics. The first thing is about relationships. So I know firsthand from having seen at my camp, I was luckily single at the time when I went to camp. But I had friends that weren't single who went to camp, and I saw how difficult it was when you've got a relationship back at home, and then you're in camp and you've got it's very isolated. You're not really on your phone much. You can't communicate with your partner back at home. It was difficult for those relationships, and I actually saw some of them break down. And in your book, I know that at the time you were in a difficult relationship. What would you say was your perspective of being in a relationship and going to camp?
It can go one of two ways, to be honest. You either really appreciate what you've got back at home, or your eyes are opened to the situation you're in, basically. My case was I was in the second camp. I got to saw so many amazing people and backgrounds, and it really sort of opened my eyes to what else is out there. There were people that, really had that homesick feeling. They were on the phone to their boyfriends and girlfriends all the time. There were people that cheated on their partners. It's a whole mix of different experiences at camp. But for me, personally speaking, I saw there's better fish in the sea.
And so I think the point is, if you're in a secure relationship back at home, then you should be absolutely fine, but a pre-warning that you're not really going to be able to speak to your loved one as much, and they should hopefully be okay with that. But if you are a bit insecure in your relationship, it is a warning that are going to be, which is my next topic, camp goggles, which can sort of distract you. Camp goggles is, people watching this might not know what I'm talking about, and I thought that it was only a saying at my camp, but you mentioned it in your book, and I wondered if you could explain what camp goggles are.
We called it the Honeystone 2-point bump, or camp goggles. I touched upon it earlier about how camp is so isolated, and I always call it a bubble. There's like a real thin bubble where you can't step out of camp. You have to look after these kids. Camp goggles is basically where your standards for the opposite sex lower a couple of notches down. We always called it the Honeystone 2-point bump, because a normal person that you would rate, say, 5 out of 10 outside of the camp walls would now be a 7 out of 10 in camp, because it's a rare commodity seeing people. Yeah.
It's really funny actually, because I had the same, and it's funny because you come out of camp, your camp goggles are off, and you're like, why did I like that person? But I think it's because it's so isolated, and like you say, you're in a bubble. I'm going to be honest, I went to Camp America as a single girl and thought, I'm going to find my cowboy out there. So I, as soon as I saw a guy with cowboy boots, I was like, great!
That's all it takes.
That's all it takes, apparently. And then you come out and you're like, what were you thinking?
I think part of it as well is because you're in the bubble and you get to see people 24/7, you know how they are all of the time. There's not really much privacy that you'll get at camp. You get to see their genuine selves. And then I think a part of it might be when you get out of camp, everyone sort of goes back to their like rigid, oh, you only see me for an hour for a coffee and that'll be it. I think part of it's that, but a big part of it is the limitation on how many people you actually see.
And then sort of the last unfiltered topic is the lack of privacy that you have at camp. So I know that in your book you sort of talked about how you first got there and you literally saw somebody like butt naked straight away. And what would you say for people that are kind of obviously thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that? Like, would you say you just get used to it?
Pretty much. I think that was one of the moments in my experience where I was like, okay, this is different from the outside world now. I wouldn't normally be having a poo on a toilet where I can see through a crack in the door, and I just tilt my head slightly and I can see an Israeli fully naked in the shower. That doesn't happen in my day-to-day life. The lack of privacy is it's just part of the fun. You find private areas. I don't know if you sort of had it at your camp, but our archery field was a very popular location, and the security were hot on that location all the time for if any sort of shenanigans. I think the lack of privacy is it's a good thing. You know, you're gonna, especially when you're living in and around kids. As a counsellor, I think you're going to expect a certain level of privacy invasion.
And then finally, to sort of wrap this up, what would you say would be your main piece of advice for somebody who is thinking of going to Camp America?
Well, it comes as no surprise for me to say, jump into it, go fully in. I think the 20s are the best time to go when you're going to camp. Beyond that, there might be career implications, there might be responsibilities like a mortgage or rent. For me, it was the perfect time at 21 to go over there, jump in feet first, take a bit of a risk. You know, it's not without its risk. It does cost money to go to camp. But not a lot of people realise that summer camp jobs are typically paid for. You get your accommodation, you get camp t-shirts, such as this. You get a load of memories. You get paid while you're out there, so you can go traveling, and you're going to make so many friends. There's literally very few negatives about doing summer camp. It's one of I'd say it's the biggest or most proud thing that I've done is to go to summer camp and take that bit of a risk. Go for it. That first day that you're at camp is the most important. I was like, you know what? No one here knows who I am. Let's go in with a brave face. Let's go into the staff room. Let's just greet myself to these people at 9 p.m, see what they think. And then at least tomorrow when I wake up, they're not strangers. They sort of know that I'm called Andrew.
That's such good advice. So as you can see, Andrew has a really detailed and great perspective of summer camp. And if you want to know more, then you need to get your hands on this book. It is full of all of Andrew's incredible stories, and just goes into even more detail, even more of the juicy bits that, you know, we touched on there. Like it's really, really good. And even if you've not been to camp, or if you're thinking of going to camp, or if you've been to camp, I actually think that it's for everybody. So where can everybody find your book, Andrew?
They can find it on Amazon. That's probably the easiest place to purchase it. It's available as paperback, hardback, ebook. I'll probably say the paperback's my favourite copy. It's really nice to hear that you think it's for everyone, because I've tried to make this not just for people that have been to camp before, but for people that are interested in going. You can compare how your camp was to it. You can look forward to what summer camp could be like for you. I'm trying to make it as broad as possible and as entertaining as possible. And there's a lot of juicy stuff in here, I think.
There is. So I will link below where you can find his book, and I'll also link Andrew's podcast as well below, which at some stage Andrew and I are going to do an episode on his podcast about my experience of camp. So thank you so much for joining me, Andrew, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it and feel that you've got more of a different perspective of camp and what it's going to be like. And thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps me out, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.